Thank you, April, for inviting us, and thanks especially to the Ulm Public Library for hosting this event. We're certainly honored and grateful to be here, and we thank your cable provider for doing the taping of tonight's program so that the word can get out about this important Civil War Veterans Memorial, because that's really what it is. It's a recreation, but the original was as much a Civil War Veterans Memorial as the statues that you see in Gettysburg or Vicksburg or any of the Civil War military parks. Because actually the original Boy in Blue, and I'll talk about the history of it in a moment, but the original was actually built during that same time. 30 years after the guns fell silent at Appomattox, there was a concerted effort to reunite the nation and pay homage to soldiers on both sides of the conflict. The animosities, the hatred had begun to fade away, but now the focus was to emphasize the heroism of the soldiers. Unfortunately, I think in our modern politically correct world, we've lost some of that, which is why statues are being taken down all over the country, and the trend is to continue that. I'm certainly against it. I know Julie's against it, and the members of the Boy in Blue Committee, which we represent, are against it, and I know many of you are against that trend as well. But the Boy in Blue is an exception. It's an exceptional monument, but it's an exception to the current rule of taking things down. We're actually putting things up. So I want to get into the history, the background, but I also want to thank you, the citizens of New Ulm, number one, for being here tonight, but also for lending us the New Ulm Battery to come over and help dedicate the memorial and do all the things. They've been involved heavily from the beginning with the fundraising efforts and also more recent efforts when we do our ceremonial events such as Memorial Day and Veterans Day. New Ulm Battery has been an integral part of that. So we want to thank them, and several of the pictures tonight will represent that. So without further ado, let's get into the meat of the presentation. I think this is an appropriate way to get started. This really sets the mood, and by the way, this quote is in the front cover of the book. "Honor to the soldier and sailor everywhere who bravely bears his country's cause. Honor also to the citizen who cares for his brother in the field and serves as best he can the same cause." We pay honor to our soldiers, and that's certainly altogether fitting and proper. But we also have to remember the people that were left behind, the women, the children, and later on the descendants of these veterans that tried to remember what their loved ones did and sacrificed. Because after all, it's these later generations, that's who the country was saved for, and that's the legacy that's being passed down. So I think Lincoln has a very important point to make there. I like this quote, especially considering where the Boy in Blue is. Mankato is a great community. I'm from Mankato, Julie's from Mankato. I was actually born in Mankato. I call it my hometown, even though now I live in St. Clair. But Mankato has what I call progress syndrome. What that means is they like to tear things down, get rid of the old and bring in the new. Sometimes that's worked for them. A lot of times it hasn't. But I think this quote from Gutzon Borglum, sculptor of Mount Rushmore, really talks about that. He says, "A monument's dimension should be determined by the importance to civilization of the events commemorated. Civilization, even its fine arts, is, most of it, quantity-produced stuff. Education, law, government, wealth, each is enduring only as the day. Too little of it lasts into tomorrow, and tomorrow is strangely the enemy of today, as today has already begun to forget buried yesterday. Each succeeding civilization forgets its predecessor, and out of its body builds its homes, its temples. Hence, let us place there, carved high as close to heaven as we can, the words of our leaders, their faces, to show posterity what manner of men they were. Then breathe a prayer that these records will endure until the wind and the rain alone shall wear them away. Now, obviously, he was talking about a granite memorial, but I think you could stretch it and include the memorial that we're talking about tonight. This is our memorial statement. When I say our, I mean the Boy in Blue Committee, who I'm proud to represent, to rebuild and erect the Boy in Blue monument in Lincoln Park that honored the courage, sacrifice, dedication, and patriotism of the Blue Earth County, Minnesota volunteer soldier, 1861 to 1865. So that's our mission statement, and that's what we've tried hard to accomplish all the way through from the inception of this organization. Actually, back in 2010 is when this organization was first formed. This is the makeup of our committee, and all of these people have served from the beginning. Julie was actually the first person that I recruited because I knew I had to have a treasurer. I knew I had to have somebody that had the dedication that she does and the meticulousness to keep good records. But beyond that, all of these folks have served essentially from the beginning. So we're very proud of that. We don't have, a constant turnover of personnel. They've been with us from the beginning. Now, as far as location, for those of you not familiar with downtown Mankato, it's very confusing. Actually, this map is even confusing because that spot that's marked, that's not where Lincoln Park is located. I took this map because it's the one that I found that had the largest, detail, or the amount of detail, the most blown up. But actually, Lincoln Park is way down here. So it's a little triangle piece of land. Actually, this is zooming in on it a little bit closer. And actually, this is a drawing that's in the book. This was actually prepared by one of the city park workers, actually. And what it was prepared for was to determine exactly the location of the memorial, the fountain base, where it was to be put. So all of those pieces had to be included. And you notice there was even an old abandoned manhole structure when we started. So this map was prepared in advance of any digging that was to be done. Now, where did the dimensions come from? Okay, that actually came from researching old city records and so on. My sister, Lori, is actually an instrumental part. She's kind of she's not on the committee, but she's actually was an integral part of this, because at the time, my sister worked for the city of Mankato. She worked for the Parks Department. She had access to some of the city archives, which isn't normally available to the public. I mean, I wouldn't have had access to it. But she was able to discover some things along with one of her coworkers, Chuck Thomas, and it was Chuck Thomas actually that prepared this map. And so the dimension, you see the 18-foot diameter, okay, they found that in the records. And so they were able to create a scaled map exactly what this would actually look like on the ground. And you notice right there, within the arc of that was the 1935 replacement Boy in Blue monument. It actually wasn't a Boy in Blue statue at all. It was I'll show it to you in a moment. But there was a replacement memorial that was built. And so that had to be moved in order to put the Boy in Blue exactly where it was. Now, the good news is when we actually started digging, this map was so accurate, they hit the footings the first time. I mean, they didn't have to dig up the whole park to find out where it was supposed to go. The research was done in advance, and that's what came out of it. If you do an aerial flyover, which the city engineering department did, this is what it would look like. This was actually taken shortly after construction was completed. You can see that the memorial is there in place, but they hit it, dead center. That's where it was. And you're probably wondering, why did that triangle exist in the first place? It's an example of a river town with two different grids superimposed. You've got the grid for the downtown portion. If we go back a couple slides just for a moment, you've got the grid that runs this way, following the Minnesota River, parallel with it. But over here, because of the river bending, you've got another grid that's superimposed. And so this is kind of, this area down here, where Lincoln Park is, it's right where that junction of streets, or those two grids, actually come together. San Francisco's a bit like that. Market Street actually is the dividing line there, and you've got, I mean, San Francisco, has anybody ever tried driving in San Francisco? It's scary for a number of reasons, but I think during rush hour you could even say that about Mankato. People actually get lost in Mankato, and that's why. It's an old river town. Of course, New Ulm is too, but New Ulm, your streets run parallel with the river. You don't have that extra bend in there. So that's why that's there. It's leftover land that was available, and that's important to understand because the Women's Relief Corps, which is the Ladies Auxiliary branch of the GAR, Grand Army of the Republic, they were looking for just such a parcel of land to build their memorial, which we'll get to here in a moment. I put this slide in just for a few points of reference. This is the J. Hubbard House. Artie Hubbard was the founder of Hubbard Milling. He actually came to Mankato in 1871, and he created his milling empire in 1878. His oldest son, actually his oldest child, but his son Jay actually built a house which still stands very near Lincoln Park. Actually, Lincoln Park would be just off the picture here. But if you go back to the slide here, this is J. Hubbard's house. So in reference, just showing you some of the landmarks in the neighborhood. And by the way, the Lincoln Park neighborhood, this area around Lincoln Park, Lincoln Park Neighborhood Association likes to call it the Triangle, but really it's Lincoln Park, and that's why they're called what they're called. It's named after the park. But at any rate, this is the largest collection of historic style homes outside of Summit Avenue in St. Paul. Mankato can boast that. So even though we do have progress syndrome, it hasn't reached all the way into this West Mankato or this Lincoln Park neighborhood. This house, affectionately known as the Castle, and I'll talk about that in a moment because the castle does come under siege at one point. John would appreciate that. I think he already knows the story. Kenny would appreciate it too. I'll tell you guys in a second. But anyway, this is, it was the Rose House originally. It was built by a colonel in the Civil War, and his last name was Rose. But this has been a boarding house for as long as anybody can remember, and it's affectionately known as the Castle because of the style, the Queen Anne. My mother actually lived in that house when she first worked in Mankato. So I do have ties to Lincoln Park, even though I never actually lived there myself. Okay, in 2005, I wrote the text for the Heritage Plaque, which is in Lincoln Park. You can see it there. In 2005, this is all that I thought would ever be able to be done. I had the dream, but I didn't know it would ever be a reality to actually recreate the actual memorial. So I did what I could, and that was to write the text for the Heritage Plaque, which was put in 2005. Okay, let's look at some history, because there's really two boys in blue. There's the Boy in Blue Memorial, the original one, which was lost, and then there's the recreated Boy in Blue, which was rebuilt between 2010 and 2015, which we'll get to in a few minutes. But just a little background history. In 1885, that triangular block owned by W.H. Shepard at the intersection of Broad, Grove, and Lincoln Streets was purchased for the purpose, and it specifically was purchased for building a soldier's monument to be erected by the Alexander Wilken Post, Grand Army of the Republic, and that comes out of the Mankato Review, September 29th, 1885. In 1892, a memorial fountain of a Civil War private at Parade Rest facing Broad Street was erected in Lincoln Park by the GAR. Now what's interesting is, as April said, Julie is an avid Mount Hart Lovelace fan. 1892 was the year that Mrs. Lovelace was born, actually, and she grew up in that neighborhood, and she's actually made quite a few references, and some of those are in the book, the Boy in Blue book, to this memorial. Okay, so in 1892, the memorial fountain of a Civil War private at Parade Rest facing Broad Street was erected in Lincoln Park by the GAR. In 1893, it was dedicated in a dedication ceremony. Decoration Day, it was called at that time. Today we know it as Memorial Day. Actually, when we went to do our ceremony in 2015, Julie researched this, and we patterned our rededication ceremony after the original 1893 one, right down to the military parade, which I'm going to show you in a moment. In 1894, we had vandalism. Happens all over, still happens, unfortunately. I mean, vandalizing statues, vandalizing public monuments, that's nothing new. In fact, the word vandal comes from the people that actually sacked Rome, when the Roman Empire fell. Vandals were a nomadic tribe in Central Europe. At any rate, in 1894, the musket was broken off the statue. I'm not sure what's the fascination with the musket, but it seems like the musket was always the target. That's what they were always going after. Maybe because it's the part that stands separate from the rest, easier to get a hold. I don't know, or else they just wanted it for their collection. Like some people collect road signs, even though that's illegal. They have them up in their bedroom or their campus dorm room or whatever it is. I'm not sure what the fascination is with the musket, but that was, and by the way, this happened in other towns. Forest City, Iowa had the same problem, where their musket actually was broken off of their statue. So it's not unique to Mankato necessarily. Okay, in 1899, we had an 80-inch Columbiad howitzer placed in Lincoln Park, and that's their spelling of it, but it was present actually at Fort Sumter. And of course, we all know a Civil War. Historians know that that's where the Civil War began in 1861. In 1909, and this gets into the story that I promised you, a group of boys loaded and fired the cannon as a 4th of July prank. They should have been battery members. We'd have given them something to do. But at any rate, the boys loaded and fired a cannon as a 4th of July prank, breaking windows in the neighborhood. This is when the castle came under siege. Because the concussion, and these guys could explain this better than I, but the concussion from the cannon was so great that even though the cannon's in Lincoln Park, across the street, there was so much concussion from that, it shattered all the windows in those surrounding houses, and it actually took the little ornament off the top of the castle roof on the turret. That's why I say it came under siege. Again, in 1911, we had some more vandalism. This time, the musket was broken completely and the fingers pried off the statue. Don't ask me why. I don't understand it, but that's what happened. By 1922, because of this, let's back up a bit. Because of this allowed the moisture, this allowed freezing and thawing to get in there and destroy the interior of the statue, the support of it. There was a storm, actually. Some people think it's the storm that brought the statue down. Well, no, it was actually weakened before that. It helped, but there was a bad windstorm in the area, and that accelerated the problem. But by 1922, the fountain had fallen into disrepair, and local citizens requested its removal. And by 1927, the last vestiges of it were gone, and so the Boy in Blue, the original, only lasted for about 35 years. We're hoping to do better this time, second time around. In 1935, and this is what I was alluding to before, but a granite monument was installed to replace the memorial fountain. And remember, this was a working fountain with water coming out of it, just like it does now. That was the original design. And in 1980, the Lincoln elm tree, which was the other big feature of this park, and we do talk about that in the book. We talk about the cannon, we talk about the Lincoln elm, we talk about all the things that were there. But the Lincoln elm tree was removed from the park because it had contracted Dutch elm disease. Tree ring dating revealed it to be about 315 years old when it was cut down. That means it was a sapling when the Declaration of Independence was being written. 150 years earlier, it was probably just a seedling, but it was here when LeSueur was exploring the Minnesota River Valley looking for copper. So I mean, it went back a long, long way. And it's too bad that we lost it, but unfortunately, everything has a lifespan, and it was up. Replacing the statue, which was erected in Lincoln Park by the GAR. These are articles that I found in some of the local Mankato newspapers, tying the DAR, the Daughters of the American Revolution, with the GAR. Many of the women that belonged to one organization also belonged to the other. And so when I was out fundraising, it's like, you know what, DAR ladies, you can help with this effort if you support what your foremothers had done, and that was to be part of this effort. So, and they did. They came forward. We actually have several of our committee members. Some of you know Susan Hines. She's actually a member of the DAR, as is Jeanette Carlton. That pillar that I mentioned that formed the 1935 replacement memorial, that actually came from a bank. This is called repurposing. Mankato's not great about doing that. I wish they did more of it, but they did recycle this piece of granite. It came from a bank, actually, that was down in where the vicinity of the Mankato Civic Center is now. That was the Spellbrink building, and the Mankato State Bank was on the main level. Well, they used that corner pillar. They just turned it horizontally and then inscribed it with the GAR message. That memorial is still in Lincoln Park. We just moved it a few feet. Nothing got thrown away. We kept it. We just added to it. So this is Lincoln Park as it existed circa 1908, with all of those elements that I talked about in their natural habitat or their natural location. You can see the Lincoln elm. I mean, look how it dominates the whole area. You can see the cannon, and you can see the boy in blue. Notice the spray. It's actually going up and it's coming down at the same time. We made one slight modification. We took this part off so that the soldier would actually show up a little better. I mean, it looks like he's taking a shower at that point. We just wanted it to gently trickle down. So that was one of the few design modifications we made. More like this, and actually, when I saw that for the first time, I was actually invited, some of you know that I portray Mr. Lincoln. I was invited there in 2006, actually, to portray our 16th president at the rededication of their memorial. Now, they already had one. I mean, theirs remained from the time it was originally built, which was about 1906. But they had to do some restoration. They had to fix the pool and so on. But they actually rededicated theirs in 2006, and I was invited to speak at that rededication in Forest City, Iowa, at the Winnebago County Courthouse. And I took one look at that, and it's like, I've seen that before. In pictures, of course. It was pictures of the boy in blue. But it's like, wow, there it is. And I thought, wouldn't that be cool if we could get ours back? And so that was one of the seeds that was planted in my mind. It's like, if they can do it, I think Mankato can do it. Okay, actually, theirs was a little earlier, 1900. The one in Wisconsin was 1906. Both of them are mentioned in the Boy in Blue book. But notice the creator here, J.L. Mott Ironworks of Trenton, New Jersey. Okay, that was one of the clues, because in order to recreate this memorial from scratch, we had to find the plans for it. Well, where are the plans? Okay, well, I mentioned my sister. She had access to some of the city archives, but who actually made the components of this statue? Well, this was a clue. So we started looking looking up this J.L. Mott Ironworks of Trenton, New Jersey, and lo and behold, we found out, or actually Lori discovered, my sister discovered, that this outfit had actually sold its holdings to a Robinson Iron of Alexander City, Alabama. Okay, so she put that all together. Well, after we were able to locate them and contact them, they said, oh yeah, we have all of that. And not only did we buy, the things that they had left, we bought all their blueprints. We bought everything. So they could actually reproduce this pedestal, this cast iron bowl that the soldier stands on. They could replicate that. And that was the smoking gun that said, okay, we're gonna figure out a way to raise the money. Remember, a single dime hasn't been raised at this point. It's just a shot in the dark to try to figure out. I shouldn't use that analogy, but it's just an idea at this point. But you're putting pieces together. So Forest City was one of the clues, and that was actually a letter that was sent back. These are just some of the documentation. There they're quoting us $29,500. That's just for the soldier. Of course, then the next step was to figure out who could replicate the statue part. This is like a giant ice cream cone. You got to put the different pieces together. Maybe a Lego set or an erector set would be a better analogy. But this is just some of the documentation showing how this all came together. It's one of those things that when you start digging into something, then you see it everywhere. We were able to find other examples and look at the similarity. This is in North Carolina, but look at the similarity in their center pedestal with ours. This is actually the photograph that we used a lot. This is the photograph that inspired me as a boy, because I asked my dad, who was a city bus driver, well, where was the boy in blue statue? Because I saw this in a book. I saw it in the Thomas Hughes History of Blue Earth County book. And he says, or I said, it says it's in Lincoln Park. Where's Lincoln Park? Well, he took me there as a 10-year-old. And of course, I was expecting to see that. What did I see? A big, huge elm tree, which was cool, but that's not what I wanted to see. There was no cannon there anymore. That 1935 memorial was what replaced it. And I was very, very disappointed. But in the back of my mind, it's like, what if? And so now, many years later, after going to Forest City and seeing that and starting to do the research, this plan was beginning to percolate. Perhaps we can do something with this. I do want to point out one of the details of the bottom bowl, this pedestal that the soldier stands on. You're probably wondering or maybe curious about, why does it have these rams and goat heads around it? Can anybody take a guess before I explain that? Why would you, this is where the water comes out, so that's the practical part of it, out of the mouths of these. But why would they use that kind of symbolism? I'll give you a hint. Think about your horoscope. Which zodiac sign is the ram? Aries. And what is Aries? That's that's the Greek. But what is Aries? In Roman, it's Mars, the god of war. It's a war memorial, people. And that's the symbolism that they wanted to show. And of course, out of Mars, we get the month of March, which can be very warlike. It comes in like a lion, and this year, fortunately, it went out like a lamb, but it doesn't always happen that way. I happen to have a birthday in March, so that's kind of cool for me personally. But you could also argue these are goat heads, which would be Sagittarius, which is supposed to represent wisdom. So it's the god of war, and it also represents wisdom. And so it's very definitely a war, and they were into this symbolism. The people of that time, the 1890s, would have understood that very, very well. Okay, so this becomes the plan of action informing the Boy in Blue Committee, which happened in 2010. Actually, the first person I went to was Julie, and she didn't tell me I was crazy. She didn't tell me I was nuts, even if she thought it, which I don't think she did. One of our other members said he thought I was nuts. That was James Olson, who's the commander of the American Legion. But I got two committee members out of that trip that I made. I was actually going to the American Legion in Mankato for a financial donation. Well, we got that, but we also got two of our committee members, Don Sandmeyer and James Olson. And James joked later that, yeah, I thought you were nuts telling me that. I said, yeah, you're right, but it's okay. Nuts can be good sometimes, or little crazy is not all bad. Because it forces you to think outside the box. But at any rate, the first person I went to was Julie, and shortly after then we formed our committee with, and many of you know Arn Kind. He's Mr. Civil War, so it's awesome that he joined, and as did all the others. But we put together a plan of action, which was to commission Goodrich Construction. Now, Goodrich Construction is well known in the Mankato area for its work on historic homes. Some of those homes that I showed you, I know Ron has worked on. He worked on the Hubbard House restoration when they did that. So he was the perfect man for the job because he had that attention to detail. He had that appreciation for history. That's the person that we wanted. And he did great work for us. But we commissioned him. He was kind of our overall contractor because remember, he's got to coordinate all of these components together so that, it's a little bit like the song with Johnny Cash, or the one that Johnny Cash sang about one piece at a time. All the stuff has to fit. And in the song, of course, it doesn't, which is why he's got 3 headlights and 1 tail light or whatever it was. He pulls the switch and all 3 of them come on, however it goes. Well, we didn't want that. We wanted this thing to look nice. So Ron was our primary go-to guy, but he coordinated with Robinson Iron. He coordinated with our artist, Alan Gibson, which is a whole chapter in itself, how Alan Gibson was found and what he did for us. Well, actually, I'm going to show you what he did for us. But so we hired our general contractor to coordinate all of these different activities. Phase 1 was the installation of the ground level pool base, installation of the bottom bowl, installation of the completed statue, and finally the dedication of the completed memorial, which happened in 2015. It took as long to rebuild this memorial as it took the North and the South to fight the Civil War. And there were times, actually, I don't want to over-dramatize, but there were times I actually felt like I was fighting the Civil War with the city. Like, you want to do what? But at any rate, and then the bottom one, the last one, create the perpetual character, we're still working on that stage. The total cost, when it was all said and done, it came in just under $200,000. So that's how much money had to be raised to pay for this. And by the way, the memorial itself is paid for. What we're raising money for now, and I'll get into that a little bit later, but it's the maintenance of the memorial. That's what I meant by perpetual care fund. We want to create an endowment of some sort so that the money is available, and it's up to the city to maintain it because it's in a city park. It actually belongs to the city of Mankato, but we want to make sure that they take good care of it so it doesn't go the way the other one did. I'm going to haunt them if it does. At any rate, we want this memorial to last for generations, just like it said, the Borglum quote that I read you earlier. Okay, well, let's look at phase 1, some of the photos. Now this is actually one of the few photographs. We're operating with old photographs because that's all we have, other than the blueprints and so on that were dug up in the research. But most of it is pictures. And they're not all the clearest pictures, and usually they're only taken from the one angle. They're taken from the front. There's things about the memorial that we wanted to see at all different angles, and unfortunately we didn't have pictures to cover all that. But this is actually when construction is beginning. We had a late spring in 2011, if some of you recall that one. Well, 2010 was no picnic either, but 2011 was a late spring. But here they're finally getting underway to actually start excavating. Remember that manhole that I showed you in the original map? Okay, there it is. The cover is actually being lifted off at this point. There's a lot of bricks. It was a brick manhole underneath. Those bricks were carefully preserved, saved. Actually, that manhole cover went to the Blue Earth County Historical Society. So we didn't throw anything away. There I'm standing in the hole, literally, with one of the construction individuals that was very instrumental. He was actually the master mason that actually did a lot of the masonry work on this. This is Mr. Ward, whose grandsons actually were part of Ron Goodrich's crew, Ward Brothers Construction. This is kind of their father figure. Unfortunately, he's since passed from the scene, but he pledged $100 on the spot when he saw what was going on down there, because he really believed in what we were doing. There you can see the excavation continuing. It was quite a project. This looks like Mankato's jacuzzi, but it's not. This is actually, and it's interesting how it was built. This is actually ground level today. So all of this construction that you see here, the base, and by the way, Ron put in more concrete than he said he even had to. He said it would take an atomic bomb to remove this, which we hope we never have. But I guess if we do, there'll be more things gone than just that. At any rate, this is ground level today, so our paver walk would be right there. But look how much infrastructure is underneath that you don't even see. There's a little better view of it once they take the forms away. It was fascinating to watch these guys work because they knew their job, they knew their trade. It was just interesting to stand back and watch them do their thing. That's the pad, the concrete pad that the pedestal will sit on. That's the beginning. Now you can see the beginning of the paver walk, which has all been leveled off now. That's a front view. Okay, now we're going to move into phase 2, the bottom bowl construction. 2014 marks the beginning of phase 2 of the Boy in Blue recreation effort. The bottom bowl or pedestal portion of the monument. This is the part that's the most authentic because this is the part that was cast from the original molds, and that's what that's explaining there. It's interesting to note that J.L. Ironworks was one of only 3 foundries in the United States that made fountains and statues like the Boy in Blue. All 3 of these foundries had closed by the time of the Great Depression. And when completed, the Boy in Blue and fountain will join the ranks of a select few memorials, Forest City, Iowa, Cape Girardeau, Missouri. That's actually where Ellen Gibson was from. He actually redid one for that. That's how we found him. Actually, we found them through the library. So when you need something, go to the library. That helps. Put a plug in for libraries over here. And that's all documented in the book, how my sister was able to find him. These are details of the bottom bowl being fabricated in the workshop in Alexander City, Alabama. So we do have southern elements here. We have southern cast iron, if you will. Somebody asked me, why'd you have to go to Alabama to get it? Well, they're the ones that do it. So I had to put aside my own prejudices as a Yankee to get this done. Talk about binding up the nation's wounds. There you go. This is the pedestal after it's been recast, and it was painted black, just like the original. That's the bracket that the boy in blue would actually sit on. There you can see a little bit of the details. So the water comes up through here, and then it percolates out through these ram's heads that you see on the sides. It was installed May 8th, 2015. Actually, it came earlier. It came on September 17th. It came to Mankato on September 17th, 2014. Well, what is September 17th? You Civil War guys and gals out there know this one. I guess it's all gentlemen now. Antietam, the bloodiest single day of the Civil War. Now, that was coincidence, or was it? I don't know. I didn't plan it, but it was neat that it worked out that way. Cast iron, of course, was the wonder metal of the 19th century, even including our U.S. Capitol dome. We think that's made out of marble, but it's not. It's actually made of cast iron. That was considered the wonder metal, just like aluminum would become, in the 20th century. Phase 3, shaping the statue. 2015 marked the third and final phase of the memorial's reconstruction, the shaping and installation of a long-anticipated soldier statue. Of course, that's the part everybody wanted to see. But that's only the cherry on the sundae. You've got to have the rest of it in order for the statue to have some place to go. But noted sculptor Alan Gibson was commissioned to do the project, and the work was successfully completed May 30th, 2015. Traditional Memorial or Decoration Day was chosen to be the date of the monument's final dedication. Now, we were cutting it tight because the statue arrived for installation on May 29th, 2015. And of course, we'd sent out all the advertising, we'd done all this work, and it was raining on the 29th. Surprise, surprise. But it cleared up. It's like the sun came out just in time. Kind of like Lincoln's second inaugural. At any rate, here we have Alan Gibson actually making this form. Now he took actually the statue from Cape Girardeau, Missouri, because it's at their court building, their appeals court building in Cape Girardeau. They have a Civil War statue. And that's actually the one that he repaired for them because a windstorm had toppled it as well. And actually, he said he picked it up in pieces. He picked it up, the pieces, and put it in a bucket. And then he put this thing together like a jigsaw puzzle. And it's all explained in the book. But he had to go back then and get a duplicate cast of it made, or the shell that he actually puts the fiberglass or the resin into. And the second time he actually made two of them. He's got an extra one in case somebody else ever calls him for it, because when he did the Cape Girardeau one, he's thinking, okay, nobody's ever going to need this. Until my sister got hold of him. But anyway, he was very good at what he did. And I could tell that he sensed wouldn't you agree, Julie, that he sensed the significance of what he was recreating? I mean, I think he got into the value of it, and I don't mean just the monetary value. I mean the intrinsic historical value of what he was recreating. At any rate, there's that shell. Now this is the one, the original pewter statue in Cape Girardeau. That was broken into several hundred pieces. So he put that back together, and then he made a copy of it. And that's the prototype for ours. Okay, these are just some of the sponsors. This is only a partial list. You can actually go to the Boy in Blue website and see all of them. It's like pages and pages. But these are just some of the sponsors that have pledged support over the years. We did a number of, people ask, well, how did you raise the money? Well, we did a lot of things. We had concerts in Lincoln Park. In fact, that became an annual tradition. We're having one on July 2nd, which, again, Civil War historians, what's the significance of July 2nd? Gettysburg, and specifically the charge of the 1st Minnesota. So guess what our theme is going to be this year? And yes, I'll be here on the 3rd, but Mankato's Boy in Blue concert will be July 2nd. Rain or shine, if it rains, which we hope it doesn't, it'll be probably at West High School, but I'll make sure that this concert goes on one way or the other. One year we had a horrible windstorm, but luckily we had a place to go inside. You know, life in Minnesota, you got to plan for the worst and hope for the best. Well, if you notice the date on that one in 2013, July 2nd was also our concert date, and so our theme that year was the charge of the 1st Minnesota as well. This is actually the paver walk before the pavers have been laid. Not sure who that guy is, but at any rate, we also did a number of cemetery walks where we actually had costumed historical characters representing some of the soldiers. And a lot of the soldiers that served, by the way, there's 682 names inscribed on this memorial, but a lot of the soldiers that came from the Mankato area are buried in Glenwood Cemetery, one of our oldest cemeteries in town. It would be like the New Ulm City Cemetery out here. At any rate, we actually had costumed historical interpreters representing different soldiers, so they would stand by their gravestone, and then it would be as if they came to life to tell their story. We also have the Civil War Symposium, which is a tradition that still goes on. That's in March. This one happened, I just used the poster from 2014, it happened to be March 15th. This year it was March 23rd. Next year, actually you can put this on your calendars now, it'll be March 28th. So we always try to have it in March, probably to honor that Aries reference that I talked about before. Anyway, these are some of the folks. Some of you may know Ron Affolter, Susan Hines, Daryl Herlicka. He's actually our telegraph guy. Knows a lot about the telegraph. He was at this year's symposium. Let's see, there's a few characters in here that you guys would know. That guy sitting right there, and that guy just left. So we do have a steady presence of the New Ulm Battery, and we appreciate that very much. There's a couple other of the younger Battery guys. Joe, you probably know him. George Lusky, who was, he's recently retired from his office, but he was our vice president for a number of years. We had Steve Osman, actually, as our guest speaker this year, who did a wonderful talk on Fort Snelling and its role in the Civil War. These are examples. This is a play poster. I wrote several dramatic plays on the life of Lincoln, but also tied into what was happening in the Civil War at the time. So this play was done in 2014, which would have been the 150th anniversary of Sherman's March. So there was a lot to do with General Grant and General Sherman in that particular production. I had student actors playing the various parts. This gentleman actually, who's gone on to bigger things, actually he's a prominent member of Merrily Players in Mankato, but that's Lucas Youngerberg, who's playing Mr. Lincoln. That's my outfit, but it's the young man wearing it, which I was happy to oblige. But we had a number of very talented students involved. By the way, they are all three brothers. That's why I call it Brothers in Arms. This was out at History Fest. This is the Battery's limber behind them. That's one of the events that the Battery participates in every fall. Julie did a very nice display at the Blue Earth County Library. Some of you may know Shelley Harrison, who's the archivist at Blue Earth County Historical Society. There she's selling ice cream and does a very good job of it. There's a few characters. That's James Olson, who told me I was crazy. He's probably right. Of course, Arnkind, you guys know. Dedication Day, May 30th, 2015. As I said, we patterned it after Decoration Day, the original Dedication Day, which was May 30th. It wasn't until 1971 that Memorial Day was moved to the last Monday in May. That was one of those Monday holidays that they established, but that was in 1971. Prior to that, it was always May 30th, the designated day, actually ever since 1868, when the GAR commander actually, Logan, actually proclaimed it. But there, the boy in blue is being unveiled. Here's our military parade. We're not politically correct, and we're not ever going to be. There was a gentleman from, well, actually he does Confederate reenacting, but actually there is a historical precedent for this. There's at least one Confederate buried in Glenwood Cemetery, and he was representing that gentleman. I had somebody on the Mankato City Council ask me, why do you have a Confederate flag? And I explained that story. He says, oh, okay. There they are in formation. Some of these guys you recognize. There's Jerry Fastenau. He's a New Ulm battery member. These guys are battery members. Actually, all of them are battery members, but they're in infantry dress, with the exception of Jerry. That's our cannon, or your cannon, really, at the dedication. I like this picture because it's generational. You know, we're trying to, that's the future. That's who we have to appeal to. Why do we recreate memorials? Why do we do all this? It's for them. Our kiosk was dedicated on November 11th, 2017. The words are Lincoln's. It is Lincoln Park after all. Now this memorial was purposely created to be a war memorial with the soldier. But because it's Lincoln Park and because so many national cemeteries have the Gettysburg Address, we wanted to put one in Lincoln Park. And so we incorporated it into our kiosk, which is going to hold the directory so you can actually find the names along the surface. I'm sorry, I have to show you this picture, folks. That was taken here just not many weeks ago. So hopefully we won't see that again for a while. This was actually an article that appeared in the Mankato Free Press when this book was about to be published. This was in late October, actually the 26th of October. The book was released in November 3rd. And actually it took another 3 years to put that book together. Julie was instrumental in organizing all the photographs and so on. She did a really amazing job putting this thing together. I hope you have a chance to take a look at it while you're here. And this tells you a little bit about the book. It's 175 pages, full of colored pictures, and then all of the history that went into the recreation of this wonderful memorial. There it is, actually hot off the press, or actually being printed as we speak. It was done by Corporate Graphics in North Mankato, and we're actually signing off on it, saying, okay, it's ready to go. I've never given birth, obviously. Julie has, but wouldn't you say, Julie, that it's a little bit like your, we can't even say it's our firstborn child, but you've got that feeling. It's like you're handing it off, sending it out into the world and hoping that it does well. Everything you want to know about the boy in blue, it's in there. It's like Prego spaghetti sauce. In 2017, we were actually honored to be awarded the Mankato City Design Award for Excellence in Preservation Stewardship. That was totally unexpected, but someone in Mankato nominated us for that, and we were able to to accept the award, and we were very honored to do that. This is actually Ron Goodrich, our general contractor, for those of you that may not know him. Actually, I'll introduce everybody here. This is Susan Hines, that guy you know, Julie you know, this is Jeanette, and then that's Shelley Harrison. Not all of our committee could be there that night, but as many of us that could were there. And it seems to me that was a rainy night too. There must be a theme here. The question is, how can I become involved? You know, the monument is built, it's been established or reestablished, but actually there's still work to be done. And what's left to be done now is raising money for the maintenance. And so there's a number of ways that you can get involved with this. We have engraved pavers, which it says there will be used. Well, actually, they're already being used. The paver walk already exists, but you can buy pavers to represent, and they don't necessarily have to be soldiers. I mean, the 682 names of the actual soldiers from Blue Earth County that served in the war, they're inscribed in these black granite panels around the lip of the fountain. But underneath that, you can actually buy a paver for anyone you want, whether it be a family member, a friend, someone else that was in the military in a different conflict. That's what that's for. Or it could be for we have a whole section for Civil War veterans that weren't necessarily from Blue Earth County, but also served. For example, my great-great-grandfather, Wilhelm Urban, lived just over the line in Faribault County, so he's not on the actual lip of the memorial, but he does have a paver. He was actually at the Battle of Nashville in Spanish Fort, which was right at the end of the war. So it's a permanent and meaningful way to memorialize or honor a loved one. Yes, the New Ulm Battery has a paver. And this is actually what the form looks like for it. So you have a choice. You can either buy a $100 one for 3 lines or $200 for 5 lines, as long as it fits into those blanks. Punctuation does count. So for example, a quotation mark would take up one of these single spaces. It gets a little challenging sometimes to work out but it can be done. Then we also have what's called Adopt a Veteran fundraiser. You can memorialize a Blue Earth County Civil War veteran. There's 682 men that are listed from Blue Earth County. You can actually buy a name for that, and that's $40. And then you're listed as the person who did that. And we actually have a special. Julie has a spreadsheet for everything, but we got a special designation for that. That'll actually be part of that directory when that comes out, who all purchased those adoptive Blue Earth County Civil War veteran. Then we have the medallions. Julie, you want to stand up for just a second and show off your medallion? This is actually the official medallion. 100 of those were made. I don't think we have many left. And we also had a t-shirt made. And I've seen some folks around New Ulm wearing those, so that's kind of neat. Just to wrap this up, just a reminder, it is for us, the living rather, dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. That's why we have memorials, to remember, to contemplate, and hopefully move forward. On 1787, anxious citizens waited outside Independence Hall to hear the results of the Constitutional Convention. As the delegates left the building, a woman in the crowd stated, "Well, doctor, what have we got?" And without hesitation, Benjamin Franklin replied, "A republic, if you can keep it." What do local citizens have? The Boy in Blue Civil War Veterans Memorial, if they can keep it. And it belongs to the ages. Thank you very much.